Today we're going to talk to perhaps the most important administrator in an academic institution after the president. And by that I mean alumni relations. And in this case, alumni relations and fundraising. The man we're going to talk to has taken a British charity from basically doing no fundraising 5 or 6 years ago to over $1 million in the past few years. All the while that the college has been going through a massive reconstruction effort. So what he has to say could be very useful. So we're here with Mark Lewis of Good Enough College in the UK in London. And I guess my first question is, can we start with how you got to your current position and basically just a brief overview of what Good Enough College is about?
Sure. What Good Enough is it's an international college. It's for postgraduates, international postgraduate students who are studying anywhere in London, who may be doing masters or PhD or legal training courses as well. They come from all over the world, they live with us, and they go to the universities and colleges across London to do their studies. And so people kind of say, well, of course, then you're just like a hall of residence. Well, we are in that it's a place where people speak. But besides that, we are much, much more. We are a community, and that's at the core of what makes Good Enough what it is. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that. How I got to my position, to be honest, the kind of key thing I should say, blame my wife. She had lived here as when she was doing research herself in the UK. And when the job came up here, she was the one that encouraged me to apply. So what was it that interested me? Well, my background, I had been worked as a kind of fundraiser and in marketing, in the arts and in charities. And then in 2002, moved into universities and worked for University College London and for Royal Holloway. And really enjoyed that, enjoyed being back in a kind of academic environment. But I was looking to move back into a role in central London. And the job came up at Good Enough, and I mentioned it to Julia, and she said, that I should apply. And when I came in, it was meeting the members of the college that made the real difference. That sense of community was something I picked up when I first came in and met a group of members when I came into the interview. And their passion for here was palpable straight away. And what was interesting was it connected with Julia and what her experiences living here had been, 15 years earlier. And somewhere where people, those years apart, kind of talked about it with a similar sort of passion and a similar sense of pride in this community made me feel, in a sense, there was something probably in the DNA of the place that could be developed further. And that very much was the attraction for me when I took the job. So was that distinctiveness and the opportunity I felt that I could add some value in with the skills that I brought in fundraising, in marketing, and alumni relations.
Can you sort of lay out what a typical day would look like for you, if there is any such thing as a typical day?
Gosh, there really isn't a typical day. I mean, that sounds terribly corny, but that's sort of what I quite like about it. There will be an amount of email traffic, and the interesting thing with that is because, as I said, we are international, so 90% of the people, 90-95% of the people who live here are international, and therefore 90%, 95% of our alumni are international. They're not here in London. Is that a lot of the communication which I will have with alumni is by email. So I can come in the morning to emails which have come from the US and also ones which are coming in from Australia and Europe. And actually a nice example of that was we started an e-newsletter a couple of years ago, and within half an hour of putting the first issue out, I had emails coming back from people in Australia, from the US and from South Africa. There's a kind of sense of do people ever sleep? But that connection is very strong, and what that means is often I'll end up working late because I'm going to be speaking to people in the US or it's an opportunity to kind of, late into the evening to speak to people early in the morning in Australia. So that gives it that kind of shape to it. And then besides that, it may well involve a proportion of management time. I'm a part of the college's senior administration team, senior management team. So there's a lot of what I do, which is about the overall management of the college. There will be a certain amount which is team management. I have a great team here who I work with very closely, and I very much kind of operate an open door policy. And so we will, and I think the way that I enjoy working and work best is in a kind of iterative way. So we're quite open and we'll be talking about things through the day. And then there'll probably be some projects of my own that I'm working on besides that, whether it may be some larger fundraising asks to charitable foundations, preparations for a meeting, the whole range of things. So, that variety means that, in a sense, I say, no 2 days genuinely are alike. I should say with that also, the days will be punctuated, and every week at least a number of days are punctuated by alumni who are visiting. So they will. We are in the centre of London, in Bloomsbury, which is one of the main university areas, about 10 minutes walk from King's Cross, so very well located. And the college runs a place called the Goodenough Club, which is 4-star visitor accommodation to London. So alumni will come back and stay there, and we'll encourage them to come and visit us. It's a great way for us to connect with people. So people, alumni will drop by during the day and want to say hello, and I will, whenever possible, endeavour to do that. Or they'll simply be walking through the square or something and come in. And again, that I see as a priority whenever I can, is to get out and say hello to people.
Because the college is a not-for-profit or a charity, how should a foreign professional, what should they keep in mind when they're going to approach a British not-for-profit or a British charity?
I mean, I think the first thing is that they, not-for-profits in this country, in the whole range of guises, have a huge role in society. And are very key players across the breadth, whether it's education, arts, social services. They are across all areas and are significant players. So the first thing that I would say to anybody is, don't think it's the easy option. That I think the not-for-profit sector here, like in other countries, I suspect, has sometimes can have a bit of a chip on its shoulder about the corporate world and the feeling that the corporate world does things better, is more efficient in the way it runs. In my experience, that's not the case at all. It may be that the corporate world is actually often has a clearer focus on the bottom line, and often within a not-for-profit, your goals really are often more complex, and there's often soft goals which are in there about quality of contact, etc. It's not reducible simply to a financial bottom line, and that means that people within them are often actually doing an extremely good job at balancing the necessary resource issues with actually still delivering quality services to people, which are whichever field it is, which have great value, and that is for me then is a real kind of efficiency and effectiveness as an organisation. So that's the first thing I'd say. I'd say there's a great professionalism, in them, and you really do need to know your stuff, and a real commitment. I mean, people working in most sectors have made a conscious choice to work in those areas and are very committed to what they do. So again, the culture is pretty hard working. I mean, I've worked in the arts, I've worked in mental health charities, I've worked in education, and none of them have been places where it's been a 9-to-5 culture. You might, in some areas, in a sense of what, some of the perhaps the support areas, you may get that, but from the majority of people, there is a real, work ethos all the way through, and that matched with a commitment to the organisation. So it's, it can be a pretty rigorous business in terms of that. From the other side of some of what I do, which is the fundraising side, I think in this country, I mean, an awful lot of the charitable sector has had a lot of government support since over the past 50 years, and is seen as responsibilities of the state. That's changing, and the relationship with fundraising, I think, has changed in terms of that. For many years, I think that the fundraising model over here was two ways. I mean, one was somewhat paternalist, so the great and the good, giving towards things where they each served on each other's boards, and then at the other, a more public fundraising, which was really based very often on kind of on guilt in lots of ways, on guilt levers, a sort of sense of give or this bad thing will happen, or give because this bad thing has happened. And one of the things that I think was something for me where I moved into education and picked up from the US in terms of that was much more a sense of what philanthropy can do to change lives, change organizations, at the positive side, help us to do this thing that we can't do otherwise, that helps us with our mission. And ultimately, I think that particularly as you move into looking at major gift fundraising, that approach has a greater potential. And I think, organisations in this country are beginning to understand that more as the need for them to raise more money is becoming more apparent.
You have sort of overhauled the Alumni Connection Network and the way the college interacts with its alumni, both right when they become alumni and those that have been absent for many years. What sort of measurable benefits are you seeing? Or put another way, how are things different from the first day that you took up your position and where things stand now?
Yeah, I mean, the college had some kind of had an alumni relations program for many years. In some ways, before many universities had it. It was called the Fellowship, and was a great way for people to keep connected and connected with each other. Like many sort of alumni associations, it does that, and it's not necessarily always quite as engaged by the organisation in terms of what the vision is of where the organisation is going. So when I started at Good Enough, I think that was the case. There was a lot of warmth which was there, but that warmth, you might say, was not sort of shaped strategically and engaged strategically with where the college was going. And at the same time, there was no, the college really wasn't doing any fundraising, and that's a few £1,000s each year was being raised at that time. So there really was no fundraising program. So what we've done over the past 4 years is to move both of those things together. And we have been, I'm trying to go back to the sense of the measurable benefits. I mean, a sense where we are is that we now, over the past 3 years, we've raised more than £1 million, and that's increasing, still year on year. And we are tracking alumni. We do an awful lot of work. You can imagine in any alumni program, the challenge of keeping contact with people is one of the biggest things that one needs to do. And trying to do that with people internationally, and trying to do that with people who are not just moving back to their own country, but we will often get members in this college, for example. You may have somebody who is, as an example, I know somebody who is German, who actually applied to here from a graduate program they were on in Brazil, where they had met their wife, who was European, but not German female. I can't quite remember which country she's from. They've come and studied here, and I was talking to them last spring before they were deciding what they might do. And they had 4 or 5 different countries as options about where they might go on to. And in the end, actually, they've stayed in the UK but moved to Leicester in the Midlands. And so that complexity of where people move to is a real challenge to keep involved with. And it's to find things that will encourage people to give us their information because they want to keep that contact going, but they get some benefit from the transaction. So things like introducing the newsletter, which has meant that we've had much more of a dialogue with members, and there's a greater immediacy. We still have a print magazine that goes out twice a year and is important in a sense because it gives a longer retrospective of what's going on. But what that doesn't do is it doesn't allow that kind of immediacy of contact backwards and forwards. It doesn't give people a sense of what's happening here today. So the e-newsletter has been a big development. I've been pleased that we've kept consistent open rates of around sort of 30% for that. Over the years, and as we've cleaned our data and we've increased the number of email addresses, that's continued. So effectively, the number of people who are reading it is increasing as we go on. And then, the number of people that we are coming to stay, as I said, at the club, we monitor all of these things. So what we are doing in terms of, you say that those measurable benefits is one thing, we're actually measuring them. And we're actually looking and saying, well, how can we get more people to do this? This is an interaction which has got benefit for those individuals, has benefits for us. How can we encourage other people to do it? And actually having data and evidence to back that up with. And on the fundraising side, we've built the fundraising programs. We started with a telephone campaign, which has proved, successful. I'm happy to talk more about that. And now we're building a major gifts program on the back of that. And the interesting thing with that is that that's been, a cultural change to do that. I think that particularly around fundraising more than the alumni contact, there was a lot of myths beforehand, and very often, institutions will think things about, say, fundraising or something they haven't done, which start to become enshrined in stone simply because nothing has challenged them. So, at the college here, for many years, it was the sense that, there was a feeling that, well, alumni know the college need money, and they're not giving, so obviously they're not going to give. The obvious thing in terms of in terms of the fundraising program is actually people weren't being asked. Because very few people around the world, wake up in the morning and go, what should I do today? I think I'll give some money to Goodenough College. And that process of asking is the foundation of any fundraising program. And so working out then what it is you're going to ask for is key to that, and then how you're going to ask.
How do you overcome the issue of the fact that all of your alumni were in London for academic reasons and were also tied to an academic institution who will also be soliciting them for fundraising campaigns?
That was myth number 2, which was, well, they've got all of these other calls on them, which and particularly where they studied in London and where they might have studied in the US or in Canada or something else. We are not the same as those institutions, and it was understanding, what we do and what we mean to people, which was important. I cannot go, for example, and ask somebody to give money towards research in TB. And we have people here who are working in those fields and are studying at London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. I can't ask for a chair in classics because we don't have that. And those are what, in a sense, lots of universities are going for. But what we are here is this sense, as I said, of community. And the values which we bring in of international understanding, tolerance, and the experience of living in this international community, which is supportive here in the heart of London. And what many alumni have said to me over the years is, look, LSE and King's, we had a great experience there, terrific academic institutions, but in a sense, they were the day job. But Good Enough is the place where we had the experiences and we made the friendships that made this such a special year for us. And we want other people to continue to have that experience, and it changed people's points of view. And that changes around the world. I was in India last year, and we had a reception in Delhi, and the number of Indians who came along to that, who said, when I lived at Good Enough, I met and mixed with Pakistanis for the first time, and some of those, it sounds very corny, but some of those are now my best friends. In fact, Rita, I married one in several cases. But those experiences that are what we're about. So we tap into that, and again, that should be the mark of any good, fundraising program. When I worked in mental health, I had colleagues who would say, "Well, gosh, everybody gives to children, or they give to the animal sanctuary. Why do they give to them and not to us?" And my job was never to say, "Please don't give to the animals." My job is to say give to mental health, and my job here is to say give to Good Enough, and this is what you can do to help us to transform lives and ensure that other people can have the wonderful experience that you had.
Now, the college is going through a very large capital project of renovation of basically the entire campus of both buildings and around the square that you're located. How has this affected your ability to interact with alumni, to do fundraising, in the fact that it's just a massive upheaval for so many years?
And you'll understand that with a residential college, our buildings are absolutely key to us. So in a sense, the refurbishment has been the fundamental program for the fundraising, and has been the program that actually we've used to really build the fundraising around. It's the core of what allows us to do the other things. And again, that's been the focus that we've taken with people. But it's a challenge because the college, not just because it wasn't fundraising, but because of where it was up to, made a difficult decision. This was before I arrived, to sell a building, the money from that has gone towards the refurbishment, and further money is needed. But many people were upset by that decision, and understandably so. And in a sense, it was the selling of that building which really, I think, made the college feel actually we should explore some of these other angles, such as fundraising, and see what we can do. So there's a body of alumni out there who are still angry about the sale of that building. But there are continuing. Myth number 3 of those ones that once told: don't trust self-appointed spokespeople. And one of the things that you find when you come into institutions which haven't necessarily been doing something is that there will be people who will tell you that they know, what should be done. And so there were a number of people, and there are people around who are close to the college who would talk about the alumni. The alumni are angry about the sale of Bowery Court, or the alumni, feel this. And actually, the alumni don't feel anything. The alumni are not a herd of wildebeest. They are, 14,000 people spread across the globe with the same complex relationship with institutions that all of us have. The alumni are you and me. In fact, you are one of them. And all will think and feel about things differently. And so my job is to explain and put to them what we're doing, and to be consistent in that. And so if we go back to what I was saying about the sort of alumni communication and building from that sort of the foundation there of a warmth, but it not necessarily being strategically engaged by the college. One of the things that we've been doing, I think, over the last few years, alongside the fundraising and other things, is to be consistent, to give a sense, this is what the college is doing, this is where we're going, this is the refurbishment, this is what's happening. Yes, it is costing this money. And taking people with us, I hope, through that process. Because ultimately, at the end of this refurbishment, the college will be in a stronger place than it was before. And alongside it is going there's the bricks and mortar, but there's actually a new sort of business planning approach, which means that hopefully in the future, the college will never be in a position it needs to sell property again. So there's a very strong message. And I've been saying to people over the last few years, the proof will be in the pudding. You will see the refurbishment and you will see where the college is up to. And that sense of time and a continuum, people have, you might say, views have been changed along the continuum. Some people understood and were happy about things straight away. Some people, now that we've reopened one of the buildings, through the refurbishment, and they've come back and they've seen what we've done. They've met members who are here now, students, who will talk in the same way about their experiences as was happening before, but can also say that they've got less issues with plumbing than there were, and actually there aren't mushrooms growing in their shower. And yes, they've had heating every day they've been here. All of these things which make life the improvements that we've been aiming for with the refurbishment, they've now been brought on board. There's other people who it will take longer. But that continuum in terms of refurbishment is a process that we're having to take people through. But ultimately, I think when people see that, the effect overall will be positive.
I will assume that just like in an academic institution, there is always we could use more funding for various programs. If you were to have a hypothetical need list and a want list, what would be at the top of the things you feel you need, and then what would be at the top of the things that you would want?
It would be great to have more access to content. Provide people who can help provide content, and have got web skills in terms of that. One of the things, we're a small organisation, 50 full-time staff, which covers across everything. 4 people in my team. We're trying to communicate with 10,000 people around the world. Actually, 5 people that we are now. There's 1 person who's marketing communications. There's an awful lot now that we want to do. And there are different media which we are, working in from Facebook to the website to developing our own online community. All of this needs to be done with some quality to it, and also with some content, because content is what brings people back. And one of the things, when I said about the e-newsletter, which is, I feel has been a success in that, it's because we consciously went for something relatively low tech in terms of it, and something short and snappy once a month. I think, I get lots of newsletters where people, you can clearly see have spent huge amounts of time on it. And it's full of content, and I'm probably not really going to read it. But actually, once a month into somebody's inbox that they scan through and maybe just click through on something, its aim is to just remind them that we're here and remind them of the good things that are still happening here. So the more that we've been expanding what we've been doing, the greater challenge it is for us to keep both the consistency of that and to keep working across the different, the different media and social media. So that would be, I think, the top in terms of that. The second top would probably be another fundraiser to allow me to be able to keep my focus much more on the higher level side of things, which is taking up more of my time. So somebody who perhaps can do more grant applications and do some of the middle level giving. So I'd say that those were my top thing. One always wants the top thing to be people, because they're what make the difference. More paper clips are more paper clips. the one side on top of that, not empire builder when I talk about more people either. I mean, this is about, I need to be able to justify the increase that we have in terms of our return on investment, across everything that we do.
Our final component is because we do these interviews to also sort of give classmates an idea of what the job market could be like. I'm going to read you a list of some of the courses that we take, and I'm just wondering, from someone in your position, which of these sound to be the most important, and if you think I missed anything, or like if there's a gap that would be very helpful for someone in your position. So we have marketing and recruiting, policy writing, comparative international education. We have a principles and practices. It's kind of a survey course. Budgeting for higher education institutions, staff management, specifically in international contexts, study abroad programs, international exchange, counseling skills for advisors, the basics of higher education administration, international education design and assessment, different cross-cultural classes. This is pretty broad of sort of different things to keep in mind when dealing with different cultures in a situation. And then finally, international student and scholar services, so visas and student advising for international students.
It's a great list, and I think there's a lot of those things which, in a sense, other departments within the college would really value. So the things like the visa services, etc. Our admissions team, I think, that kind of knowledge would be really important to them. Again, that goes being back to a small organisation, that there's often cross-fertilisation between things we do. Of those, I think from here, the marketing and recruitment side will be really key. Within my team sits now the marketing for the college, and a real understanding of how we connect with audiences. And I have to actually, a great thing that we're going to steal from you, we're going to take on, is I got a great letter through a month or so ago from the Institute, about having written a letter of recommendation for you, Lars. And it said, that you were pleased to tell you that Lars was admitted and is completing the first semester of study, and appreciating the fact that I'd taken this time to do this, and with a brochure in asking me, to tell other people if they're interested, would I recommend other people in the future. That's a great marketing tool, for somewhere like here, because we are looking, our pull for people is the whole world. So how can we go and market to the whole world? But if we have a student coming from a country which we decide is a target for us, let's say it may be say Uganda, for example. We don't have as many African students. To actually put a pack like this together and send this out to the person who recommended them in Uganda would, I think, be a terrific thing for us to do. And so, it's those kind of skills and people who will think about that sort of thing that would be really valuable. Policy writing, I ticked in terms of, I think, everybody needs to have the ability to put a case together, and to put a case together which is based on evidence and analysis, but it has to have some real world outcomes for us, when you get into real world situations. So it's not necessarily a college paper, but the skills that you're using, have some similarities. Don't always need it footnoted in a full bibliography. And the other one that that struck me from that list was the cross cultures. We have 700 students living here who come from 70 or 80 different countries. And an understanding of that, our alumni therefore are living in 150 countries around the world, is I think is something that we all could benefit from. We use for our telephone campaign, for example, the telephone fundraising, we may have a student from Ecuador who English isn't their first language, speaking to somebody in Bangladesh. Similarly, English isn't their first language, so the language barrier becomes a challenge to begin with, and then the cultural differences between them, are potentially huge, and they're centered around the shared values of the college here, but an understanding of all the dynamics of that, I think, would be really key. The area that I think you missed, which isn't on there, and it may be that almost self-evident stuff, but for me is very key to everything, is actually what's often called soft skills. I mean, the communication skills, the interpersonal skills. All so much of what we're doing from here is about relationship building, and whether we're doing that on the broad level with publications, or whether we're doing it on a narrow level of a one-to-one communication, it's all about building those relationships. And when I say the alumni, I clearly I can't build a personal relationship with each one, but I like them to feel like that. I think there is a risk sometimes of putting technical skills and knowledge ahead of those personal interactions. And I'm not sure how easy those things are necessarily always are to teach, and how much of them come inherently. And I struggle with this myself. But they are, hugely important. They're hugely important two ways. I mean, they're hugely important in both what one does externally, but with one one's either marketing or fundraising, or the alumni relations, but also actually with how you build contact internally within the organisation, how you work with your with other teams, with other departments, how you're able to understand the importance of managing upwards. All of these things actually, good people on a kind of marketing and fundraising side who have hopefully got those soft skills, use them very well to manage their internal relationships as well.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm kind of up against our time wall here, because there's someone else who's going to jump in the booth here to do a similar thing to what we're doing. So I will say thank you very much for your time, and I think we got a lot of boxes ticked that will be helpful for some of the students, especially like myself, who are looking at sort of the marketing and alumni connections and how these tie in together. But so I'll follow up via email with you, and we'll go from there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, well, that's great, Lars, and to those of you who are watching this, then I wish you the best of luck. It's an exciting field, and I think there's a real growth in potential. Students around the world are becoming much more mobile, and moving. What's interesting, in a whole range of different directions, and not just the traditional ones, as you might see. And so there's a challenge for us to both work with those streams and also sometimes against them.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Mark.
Take care, Lars. Bye.
Bye now.